Here in Wales, melting ice revealed a dramatic world of mountains and valleys, rich in natural resources, everything that our early ancestors needed to thrive.
Evidence of these early humans has been found all across Wales. And today, I'm in Anglesey, where I'm meeting Dr James Dilly, an experimental archaeologist who has brought me to the site of the Stone Age axe-making workshop to teach me the ancient art of axe-making.
Tell me about some of these tools that you have here.
So for some of the tools I have in front of me would be exactly the tools and equipment of your Neolithic axe maker here 5,500 years ago. I've got my beach pebbles that I've collected from the shore just behind us, and this unusual looking item, it's a red deer antler, and these make really good tools for refining the axe head before you go to that polishing stage.
So are you banging the axe head with it?
Just like a hammer, yeah.
And we found these on archaeological sites, so that's why you know they were used at this time.
We have, and examples have been found from the Neolithic across Europe that still have pieces of stone or flint, if they were using flint, embedded in the face of the axe. And you can actually see on my one there are still a few fragments embedded into it. The earliest example we have from Britain is from the site of Boxgrove, an antler hammer from 500,000 years ago.
Wow.
So I can use that to take long pieces off, and I have a rough stone here to take off the very sharp edges. If I was to strike the very fresh edges with an antler where they're very thin and fragile, it just wouldn't be able to withstand the shock that I put into it. The pebbles I'm going to use to take off some of the first flakes from my block of stone. These need to be quite hard material. This is quartzite, metamorphic rock, and I can use these to really strike very hard onto the microdiorite that we're sitting on.
So they would have brought these up, and then what? They would have just left them here, or they've taken them
Almost
down
definitely. There's no sense in taking them all the way down the hill if you're going to come up again. And it's an almost certainty that it wasn't continuous quarrying here like we have today in the nearby area. And we certainly know from other Neolithic axe production sites that it was more sporadic. And we don't know whether it was a local group that controlled the site or whether it was people travelling to these axe production areas. What we do know about the axes from here is that the finished versions travelled hundreds of miles. We're here in North Wales now, but I'm from near Cambridgeshire, and examples have been found there, or famously in the ditch at Avebury, again hundreds of miles away. So these must have been desirable products.
And why is this stone so highly regarded and so useful?
Actually, it's a fantastic rock for flaking. Now, it's not as easy to flake as this stuff, which is flint.
This is very, very sharp, and does it come off easily, the flint?
That's it. It's very hard, but hardness comes with brittleness, and brittleness is not ideal for an axe head that's going to be hitting a hard tree continuously. What you need is this local material, the microdiorite. Now this bit is particularly special because this is an actual Neolithic roughout that was abandoned over 5,000 years ago.
That's amazing. And this was just found around here?
Just down the slope.
And how long would it have taken to make this form, this shape here? This is not a final product?
No, it was abandoned at some point, and it's hard to say why really, because it's a good shape. I can only imagine that there might have been too much material that was taken out the back, or because this is patina that's generated over 5,000 years, they might have seen a fault that's under this that we can't easily see today. But to get to this stage from a flake that would have been detached from the outcrop of rock here to this stage, 10 minutes, if that. Very, very quick.
Can I have a look at the axe there?
Of course. So this is a replica that I've made using the stone from, well, around you really. So it's been flaked into a rough out, and then it's been polished smooth on a sandstone block.
It's amazing. It's so smooth. It's beautiful. If you look at the pieces of stone here, they're so rough, you just can't even imagine that it would turn out like this.
And that's through the flaking process and about 30 hours grinding it back and forth on a piece of sandstone, and all of that effort makes it a better, longer lasting tool. It's a different way of using an axe over a modern or metal axe, in that a metal axe creates a V-shaped profile because you can cut a flat angle into the tree. But these axes work far better with a U-like profile, in that you're glancing the wood and using the head weight of the axe to peel off pieces.
So you're going to show us what you do now.
So I'll show you the process of making a rough out from just a raw block. So I've got my Neolithic tools and safety equipment, apart from the goggles, of course.
With really attractive goggles.
I'm sure they would have used them in the Neolithic if they had them. And then big old piece of the micro diorite, and I'll look for a good place to start my work. Start at this end, and a big beach pebble, and I'm going to strike it on the edge to take my first flake off. It's not a hard hit.
James moves through the various tools he showed me, working next with the rougher sandstone, and then the antler hammer for more precise shaping of the stone.
So it provides me with a much thinner flake, a far more invasive flake, and I know that the shock will follow that ridge, and I could attack it from here or here. So here it is, a Neolithic axe rough out.
Wow, look at that. It's hard to imagine that this has come from that bit of rock. And it only took you, what, 15 minutes?
Something like that, but that's the quick bit.
Yeah, I know. Can I just see the other one? So that's the finished product here. Compare. Wow. So you've got a bit of work to do, really, haven't you?
Yes, a bit of work, and once you've got that grinding stone or polissoir with that 30-40 hours, you will move a stone axe head to polish it 30 kilometres back and forth.
This is great, though. It is really, really beautiful. I'll take this with me then.
Well, now you can trade it in for your bronze axe as time passes.
Flint and stone tools may have come to define this period, but they're not the only bits of evidence our ancestors would leave behind. To discover more, I've come just a few miles inland to one of the most remarkable ancient sites in Wales.
Bryn Cali V, the mound in the Dark Grove in English, was originally constructed in the early Neolithic, a period where we see the advent of agriculture, permanent settlements, and investment in the landscape. The site consists of this huge henge, a bank and ditch, enclosing a circle of stones.
Towards the end of the Neolithic, this site had a redesign, a makeover if you like. In the centre, the stones were knocked over and a chambered tomb was created, and it was covered with an earth mound. And what we see today is really only half the size, because it stretched 26 metres, so it would have been absolutely enormous and a real feature in the landscape. Inside, this long, narrow passage leads to an octagonal chamber. And in the chamber, they found burnt bone, flint artefacts, and a patterned stone. But that's not the most amazing thing about this place. Once a year, on midsummer, at sunrise, sunlight creeps all the way along this passageway and it hits the back of the chamber, illuminating it.
Structures like Bryn Cali V allow us an amazing insight into the lives of these ancient people. They give us a sense of the community, organisation, the skills that these people must have had to undertake significant building projects.
This site demonstrates the ingenuity and the sophistication of the Stone Age people, but it's really just the beginning of our story.
Roughly 4,500 years ago, everything began to change with the influx of a new wave of people to Britain. Arriving from continental Europe, they would bring with them an array of new ideas and technologies, including a unique type of pottery that would change life in Britain. They were the beaker people. But it wasn't just pottery they were bringing with them.
This is copper, well, copper ore, and it's this remarkable material that came to define this period.
At first, copper was used on its own, but by about 2200 BC, people began combining the two metals, copper and tin, to create bronze, the metal that would come to revolutionize and define the age. To learn more about the discovery and mining of these metals, I've come to the Great Orme, the site of the largest prehistoric copper mine in the world, to meet mine explorer and guide Nick Jowett, who was one of the first people to explore this site.
So Nick, this place here is one of the oldest and one of the biggest Copper Age mines in Britain. Well, actually in the world, isn't it?
Yeah, so for a period of about 200 years, between about 3004 to 3600 years ago, this was certainly one of the largest copper mines in the world. Analysis of the ore now tells us that this mine supplied 98% of Britain's copper needs during that middle period, but also in excess, and we now know that copper from this mine, probably being manufactured locally into axes, were being traded across Britain and across into northern Europe. There are hordes of axes in Holland and an axe as far away as Sweden that have now been proved by analysis to have come from this mine.
So like 98% of the axes were from here?
Yes, so there are earlier mines than this in Britain, much smaller, but when you get to this sort of Middle Bronze Age period, they all shut down and all the concentration is here, and this was the only mine then supplying all the needs of the country.
Going out to Europe?
Yes.
So it was, I mean, it was famous then, really, in Europe?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, as I say, Sweden, 1,200 miles away from where we're sitting now, they must have had that connection and known where the material that they were trading for was coming from.
It's amazing. And when was this place found? People didn't always know that it was here.
No, I mean, in recent times, up until 1987, all of this was buried in the ground. As well as being mined in the Bronze Age, it was also mined in the 18th and 19th centuries. They brought hundreds of thousands of tons of waste material out of the mine and just dumped it on top of the Bronze Age working.
This was all
All
covered.
of this was buried, yeah. I mean, if we see the entrances and the rock here, there was no rock, or there wasn't an entrance or any rock visible up until 1987. The mine was uncovered because the local council wanted to build a car park on top of it. They knew there were 19th century mines here. They didn't really know where they all went. They didn't know if there were big chambers underneath the area they wanted to build a car park. So they brought in some mining engineers and cavers. They opened the old Victorian mine shafts and went down, and as well as finding evidence for the 19th century mining, found evidence for, as I say, what's one of the largest Bronze Age mines in the world.
And you were one of the first people to go in,
Yeah, so
weren't
I
you?
was sort of very fortunate. In 1987, I was in a local mine exploration group, and when the Vivian shaft was opened, we were allowed to go in and just really start
I
exploring.
bet that was an interesting experience.
Yeah, it was, because we knew that nobody had been in those tunnels for over 120 years, and of course now we're finding tunnels that nobody's been in for 3,500 years.
Fantastic. So, shall we go ahead and have a look?
Yeah, let's go and have a look.
It really feels like a mine here. It's quite narrow, isn't it?
It is. So because of the very simple tools, stone and bone and bronze that they were using, they were reluctant to take out any more waste than they really had to. So lots of the tunnels are fairly narrow.
That tunnel is tiny.
It is. It's probably 30 centimetres wide. We've found tunnels even smaller than that. And of course that indicates that they would have been using young children to
Oh,
work.
really? Children were here mining?
Yeah, probably working as family groups, maybe the adults working in some of the tunnels like these, but children, possibly 5 or 6 years old, were working in some of these narrow tunnels. But of course that was still happening 170 years or so ago, so not really a surprise.
This is the malachite.
Yeah, so this is what they were mining here. When you see how much they've left on that side wall, it gives you perhaps a little bit of an idea of what they must have been taking out. So for them to just leave that, they must have been following some really, really rich seams of copper ore into the hillside.
Exactly, because it was so valuable, wasn't it?
Yeah, it had a great value. So for them to have left this, you know, they must have been mining really, really rich veins. Let's keep looking.
Oh my goodness, this is enormous.
It is. Well, we talked about the fact that the copper runs in seams, and that's what we've been walking through the tunnels that were mined out. In this cavern here, we've just got 3 really, really wide veins of copper that have converged in this central place and just been mined out into this enormous cavern.
What kind of implements were they using here? How were they actually breaking into the rock?
The main tools that we find that they were using were hammerstones and animal bones.
Okay.
So this is a rib bone, probably from a cow. But when you look at the end, you can see the end is worn and rounded, so it tells us that's been used as a tool in the mines. I suppose they're very much a secondary tool.
Yeah.
We think they'd just be battering the rock with these heavy beach stones. So by going down to the local beaches, they could find some of the hardest rocks you can find anywhere in the world would have been on the local beaches, and they could bring them up. They're smooth, they're nice and easy to hold on to, but incredibly hard.
And that is heavy. What do you think it was like here? What kind of a life was it? It was dark, it was cold.
I think the conditions would have varied. Somewhere like the chamber here would have been quite a nice place to work. There's plenty of space, there's plenty of fresh air here. It's the very narrow tunnels, and you only really get an idea of what Bronze Age mining would be like when you get into a tunnel that you can barely move and just squeeze your way through, that you get a real idea of what life was like for Bronze Age people, just chipping away at the rock in front of them.
Extracting the copper was just the first stage in a long process. Turning it into something that people could use required the knowledge and skill of a master craftsperson. To help me uncover the next stage of this mysterious process, I've re-enlisted the help of Dr. James Dilly, who is going to help me transform these raw materials in an ancient process known as smelting.
This is impressive. So what's going on here then?
Well, we're going to be doing the full works. We're going to be crushing some ore, smelting some copper, making some bronze, and casting a bronze axe into a bronze mould.
That sounds good to me.
Well, to do that, I'm going to need you to take over from me on the bellows. So I'll leave you to do that as I have a look at the furnace.
This is the hard bit, is it?
Oh no, this is the easy bit, the laid back part. I've honestly got the hard stuff. I'll just take this comfortable seat here and reach for my cup of tea. But no, we're going to be trying to get this furnace up to and maintain it over 1,000 degrees Celsius to melt our bronze. I've done some of the hard work to make it a little bit easier, but I'm also going to have to crush some copper ore because there's nothing in here at the moment. We're just starting to warm it up ready. And then I'll move over to the ore crushing, because here at the mine it's quite likely that in the Bronze Age they would have furnaces like this constantly on the go with people crushing ore, bringing up fresh rock from underground, those bringing in charcoal. It would be a whole community effort, lots going on. So we've very much scaled it down, and just the two of us are going to be trying to do it all together.
Okay, well show me how these bad boys work then.
So it's just an up-down motion, as if you're cross-country skiing. A bit like that, really.
Yeah?
Yeah, and you can see the air coming through, so yeah, you've passed the bellowing test so far. Yeah, it's looking pretty good. So now that you've got the hang of that, I can get on with some of that important ore crushing. So I've got my actual Bronze Age mortar over here with some of the ore that I've separated from some of the limestone here. And I'm going to use just a simple hammerstone just to crush the ore bit by bit, because it's a pretty soft ore.
That's malachite.
That is malachite. I really don't have to hit it hard. You can see how easy that's crushed down. But if you were doing this on a large scale, you'd be crushing down huge amounts of ore. We're just doing almost a token amount, but we only need enough for one axe, rather than the 10 million axes that came out of the mines here.
Is that enough for an axe, those bits that you have there, or would you need a hell of a lot more?
We would need a fair bit more, but fortunately I've already been crushing up a load of the copper ore, which I have in this crucible here. So there should be enough in here between the copper that's already in here and some more ore that we'll have enough copper, but I've still got to add that most important ingredient to turn this into bronze, and that is of course tin, all the way from Cornwall. And we know from some of the Bronze Age shipwrecks that have been found and some of the other Bronze Age hoards that copper and tin ingots were highly valued and moved around an awful lot. But we're going to be doing it on a slightly smaller scale, so it shouldn't take quite as long. Otherwise, really, we would be here all day just producing copper.
What about these bellows here? This is it's a really interesting design. And is this something that we found, well, archaeologically? I mean, it would be quite difficult, it's wood, but...
We do have a few rare examples of preserved wooden pipes from Denmark, but they do date to the Iron Age. But it's an almost certainty that people used something similar in the Bronze Age. It's just a split Y-shaped branch. The bellows they may have had, they're quite simple, but we do have evidence of more simple bag bellows, which take a bit of practice, so I've gone easy on you on the pump bellows.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure that I'm bringing it up to 1,000 degrees at the moment, but...
It's looking good. The glow of the furnace between the coals suggests it's around 1,000 degrees, so you're doing fine.
And the colour, is that telling you it?
It is the colour rather than the flames, because on a bright day you wouldn't see the flames, but that bright orange in between is exactly where we need to be, and that's what they would have looked for in the Bronze Age as well. It's all by colour and eye, and if they're not sure, they've just moved the coals out the way, poke the top of the crucible, and if it floats around, it's molten.
Yeah, you know that way. So it's just about ready to go in.
It is exactly right. So I'm going to pop this crucible in that's now full of our malachite and let the carbon monoxide that's coming off the charcoal do its work on this oxide ore. So I'll move some of these coals.
So you've made a nice little hollow there.
Yeah, and it'll be just enough for me to bury the crucible that's got all of that crushed malachite in. So I'll wiggle that in there right into the heart of the furnace, and now start to put all of that hot charcoal, probably some fresh, straight back onto it. And then once it's filled with all that fresh charcoal, we can start that bellowing process to smelt the ore. So I've got some charcoal on there, and we'll put some fresh charcoal in there as well. So we have that really oxygen poor environment right around the crucible. This fresh charcoal will provide a roof and insulation as much as anything. So that'll probably do for now. So if you can start with a gentle bellow, because I'm sure there'll be some ash in there. That's looking good. Excellent. I can see some of the glow coming between the coals. So now, if we were working in a team during the Bronze Age, I'd be perhaps preparing for that copper to come out, but because we're going to be expressing the process a little bit, because we're going to be casting an object rather than just making copper, I need to think about the next stage, which will be adding some tin. And I have a piece of tin here ready that I'll be able to drop into that crucible in the near future. So whilst you're doing that, I'm also going to prepare the mould, because we've got this bronze mould here. Now it might seem a bit counterintuitive to try and cast bronze into bronze, but we do actually have around 30 or 40 examples of bronze moulds from the Bronze Age, either from the middle right through to the late Bronze Age, mostly for axes, but I think they were casting bronze into it because in theory, if you manage the temperature carefully of both the liquid and the metal itself, in theory you can cast into it without it going pop and the metal coming straight back out, or it welding itself to the inside of the mould, because if it does that, we'll never open it again. And it's a lot of investment and time to make one of these, but in theory the beauty of bronze over just a clay or a stone mould is that you can keep reusing it. But this mould is a special mould. And this I've made specially just for this because it's a replica of a bronze axe mould that was found very nearby in Conwy, just a few miles from here. I've never cast into this mould before, so it is brand new, fresh off the press. So it will be an experiment to see if it will actually work. To get to that point, I'm going to need to bind it, and I'll use just some copper wire, which we know that they were making in the Bronze Age for rivets or jewellery. If I bind it quite tightly, then that will stop the bronze escaping once we try to pour into it. I'll pop that on the furnace just at the side because I want it to begin to warm up gently. And in the meantime, I'm sure that copper in there will be starting to smell, and soon enough I'll be able to add that important tin to actually make it bronze.
How many people do you think would be working together on a smelting site like this?
It's hard to say how large the smelting teams would have been, but certainly for a mine of this size, it's quite likely we would have had people doing a number of jobs, from crushing ore to separating it.
How long do you have to heat the mould then?
The mould doesn't need to be heated too much. This will be part of the experiment to see how hot or cold it needs to be.
So is this the big moment then of adding the...
So I think that it's been in there for quite a while, and I can see that it's a really good bright glow. So I think I'll add the tin in there so we can actually make our bronze. And there we go, that's it. So that will melt in moments now, and we'll start to combine with the copper.
As evening sets on the Orme and the tin begins to melt, James prepares for the final stage of the smelting process.
Well, you look different.
Well, I've got some fully Bronze Age attire, including these fantastic gloves, as we can adhere to modern health and safety regulations as opposed to Bronze Age. But I think we're pretty close now. So what I'm going to do is carefully lift out the mould.
And it's changed colour now, hasn't it?
It has, yes, it's much darker. So I'm just setting it in this pot here, just so that it's propped up. Sand as well.
What's the sand for then?
It's just to hold it up, just so it doesn't tip over when I cast into it. Won't have a particularly good cast if it does that. So I can feel it's pretty hot even through the glove. And you do find the occasional Bronze Age pot which is almost unnecessarily tall but narrow, and I have wondered before whether they are exactly for this process, just filled with sand or soil, just to clamp the mould together. So there we go. Okay, pop that to the side, and now it'll just be a case of seeing what's in there. So I'll carefully lift the crucible out. See, it's glowing nicely in there. So I'll start to move some of these coals out of the way, and I can see it's very bright in there.
Yeah.
Okay. Grab the sides of that.
Wow, look at that. It's really beautiful.
You can start to see the top of the mould glowing as well.
And it's not going to melt it.
We will soon find out.
So not.
This is all part of the experiment.
Like, the colour changes very, very quickly,
It
doesn't it?
does.
It really cools down.
Yeah, and that was solid within seconds of it being in there. Let's carefully get the mould out. We can see where it's burned the sand around it, and it looks like there's still a bit of colour in that. So it will certainly fizz a bit when it's in there.
Oh yeah.
Normally when you've cast a bronze object, you can dip it in the water for a few seconds, take it out and it will be cold, but
Ooh,
as
yeah,
you can
that is
hear,
hot.
it's got a lot of heat in that.
So it's exciting for you, really, isn't it?
It is, yes. We're in that moment of what could be inside. So I think the water is staying on it now. It's a little bit of steam, but I think it's time to
it's
open
ready?
it up. Otherwise we'll be waiting for ages. So I'll put it on the stone here. So I'll give it a couple of taps. I have to be careful not to put too much force into these because you can start to deform the mould.
Right.
There's a bit of movement. There we go.
Ah, that's beautiful. So what do you think?
It's a pretty good cast. It's pretty clean. It's just missed the loop on the corner, and that was probably because it just wasn't quite hot enough. But it's got very little flash on it, and we've cast a bronze axe. Whatever you say, that's a small detail. So we have proved that you can cast bronze into a bronze mould.
This is like one of the first experiments to do that.
Well, we've completed an actual experiment.
Yeah.
If I'm slightly lost for words, it is a very special moment to actually use a replica of the Conwy axe mould here in the Orme mine, the setting where they almost certainly did this over 3,000 years ago.
That's really special, actually. Thousands of years in the making, but here we are. A bronze axe head. When you think back to those heavy, cumbersome stone axes, it's amazing to think about the transformations in skill and organisation. It's really extraordinary. But we're just getting started.
Join me next time where we'll uncover how our ancient ancestors became true master craftspeople, and in doing so created some of the finest artifacts the world has ever seen. Our ancient ancestors left clues for us dotted all over the landscape.
Clues as to who they were and how they lived. You just have to know where to look.
I'm Miriam Cooke, an archaeologist who has spent my career rediscovering the lives of our prehistoric ancestors. Using hands-on experimental techniques, I'm investigating and recreating key discoveries and inventions that changed the course of human history. I've already helped make Stone Age tools and cast bronze in North Wales. Now I'm digging deeper into the skills and materials of the Bronze Age world.
This is the bronze axe head that we made at the Great Orme. The difference between stone and bronze axes is that a stone axe, you would just simply lodge it into a wooden hilt. This, however, it's more complex, and the process of hafting it is a little more complicated.
In the last episode, I made birch bark tar, the wonder product of the prehistoric age. Evidence suggests substances like this were used as an all-purpose glue and a preservative.
So So I'm going to start spreading some of this birch bark tar onto the axe head.
An axe from this period discovered in Europe shows that birch bark tar was used to help fix the axe head to the haft.
So now I'm going to tie the axe head onto the handle. So I'm just going to slather this on. Right, let's give it a go.
But the Bronze Age wasn't all about making tools. In this episode, I'm moving beyond the day-to-day and into the world of Bronze Age bling, where the craftsperson was king or queen.
The Bronze Age could be seen as a period of early globalization. In this time, raw materials, ideas, technologies were transported all over Europe.
Sophisticated connections and networks forged through trade, and perhaps even by interregional marriages, were driving forces in the development of increasingly complex societies with their own distinct social structures.
For those that found themselves at the top of these new hierarchies, an obvious way to demonstrate their social position in society was through what they wore or the possessions that they owned.
Luxury items, including jewellery, would have been used by individuals to promote their position amongst their community. And it would be the job of the craftspeople trained in the latest technologies and skilled at working in the finest materials like glass, bronze and gold to serve this burgeoning market for Bronze Age bling. To help me get a better understanding of the skills required to produce Bronze Age jewellery, I've come to Jarrow Hall, an archaeological investigation centre in the northeast of England, where I've enlisted the help of my fellow experimental archaeologist, Marco Romeo Pitone. We're going to use a technique known as lost wax casting.
What we need to do. So this is the beeswax. As you know, you've got some there. It's not the easiest of wax to work with, as I'm sure you're finding that.
Yes, I'm feeling it's quite difficult to keep it plastic and to work on it.
Items created in this process range from simple shapes to intricately designed objects like animals or human figures. Making fine jewellery shapes with beeswax is a tricky process.
Well, I've been kind of experimenting with various things. So I've been adding a bit of lard into it to see if that makes it a bit more malleable. It does help a little bit, but it tends to get really bitty, really kind of breaks into bits quite quickly. You just need to keep it warm. I'm really keen to try and make this little pig figurine, which I saw in the British Museum, and which is kind of, I suppose it's representative of the first stage of the lost wax casting, which was quite simple.
Yes.
So you kind of had a solid wax model.
Hopefully we'll manage to.
Yeah, we'll have a go. What are you having to go at then?
So I'm trying to reproduce some sort of bracelet, maybe a torque.
Very nice little talk.
Worn around the wrist or neck, torques are decorative pieces of jewellery crafted from a single piece of metal. Made from precious materials like bronze or gold, it's thought they were symbols of wealth and power.
But I'm finding it quite challenging as soon as it cools down, the wax becomes brittle.
Yeah, have you tried any of that oil there?
Oh, I will
might
now.
help.
I will now.
So I think I've got a little kind of body shape here of the pig. It's
Oh yes.
what are you doing there?
I'm trying to fix my bracelet here because it got broken in two pieces.
Oh no! Have you tried another bit of lard on it?
I didn't try the lard yet,
Yeah,
but the olive oil didn't work the way I expected.
No.
It's probably the lack of skill, really.
Well, I don't know. I wouldn't say that.
This is something that we find out with experimental
Yeah.
archaeology very often, isn't it? That
Yeah.
we try these to replicate these processes, and then obviously our skills are very different from.
Yeah, there's no way that we would be able to do something that somebody that's doing it, every day.
Every day over
you know.
years and specialised in that.
But it does give you an idea, doesn't it? It kind of allows us to go through the process.
In the world of bronze casting, every mistake is a lesson. It's about embracing the process, exploring the steps, even if our creation turns out less than perfect.
Or maybe we're missing some tricks here.
The head's broken off.
Oh no!
Yeah. So what is your wax turned into there?
So I'm gonna put a hole in here,
Yeah.
and it will become a medallion or something, a pendant.
Oh right, okay. This is my pig.
That looks
It does
perfect.
look like a pig. It's it's kind of
a wild
but
one.
It's a wild pig, a very wild pig. But it has proven to me that the craftspeople of this period were very highly skilled, and I am not.
And what's the next step then?
Right, so now we get the clay. This clay actually I have treated. I've added some cow dung into it, which is very pleasant, and also some sand. Well, the idea of putting the sand in, sands, will melt at a higher temperature. So the silica in the sand, so it'll hold, hopefully the clay will withstand the heat better.
Yes.
And the cow dung holds it together as well, like a temper.
Yeah.
I'll give you some of that. So start building it around the little wax model.
Once we form the clay around the wax, we'll create a channel by poking holes through it. This allows the wax to escape when it melts, leaving an impression for the bronze to fill. We carefully build up the clay, ensuring the delicate items remain intact.
Here we go. I think mine is on as
Yours
well.
looks great. It's very professional looking.
Once complete, we'll put it in the fire to harden, preparing the mould for the addition of our bronze mix. But before we do, there's one handy little trick.
So what I've done here is I've put a little piece of clay here, because what I found is when I've kind of dried them in the oven or in a fire, sometimes the shape that you've made, it needs to be downwards so that the wax can pour down. So you can just see the head of the wax poking out there.
Yeah.
So when it heats up then, that will all melt. Okay, well I think that's pretty much done, and yours looks great.
Thank you.
Very smooth and lovely. I think they're just about ready now to go and lay by the fire and dry.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Now we've created our wax-filled moulds, we'll lay them next to our fire to dry whilst we get our coals up to temperature. Marco and I created this small furnace earlier by lining a little pit with clay and allowing it to harden, forming a tight, solid seal from the wet soil beneath.
Oh yes.
Great, so we have all of the moulds on the side here, and we've got the charcoal in, so we're ready to go really, aren't we?
Yes.
Get on with some real bellowing. Try and get that temperature up.
So what we need is a constant flow into the furnace. So we need to alternate.
Right.
Yeah.
As we gradually find our rhythm on the bellows, the temperature begins to rise, melting the wax inside our clay mould and out into the fire.
You see the wax has come out on that?
Yes.
But despite our choreographed efforts, our experimental archaeology claims its first victim, our little pig. The mould cracks. But Marco's item still remains. Having already added a bronze mix to our moulds, we've placed Marco's into the fire and surrounded it with coals to help kick-start the reaction and transform the bronze into a liquid state. Now, it's the moment of truth.
So shall we try and get it out then? Let's have a go at
One last
smashing.
surprise then. Let's see.
I'm quite excited.
Yes.
My face will drop.
Right. So we
Okay.
move carefully
Yeah.
from the surface the charcoal.
The
You can
charcoal?
see that the
Yeah.
mold is glowing.
It's glowing. Look at that.
So
Look at that. You see, we didn't do the pig. We couldn't get the pig going, but we've got Marco's lovely little item here. So
maybe we leave it just a few seconds, maybe.
So we just let it cool down a bit?
Just a little bit.
Okay.
And yeah, no, I think you can.
Oh dear, what's happening?
It looks as something is there.
It does. I'm kind of afraid that I'm going to smash the metal, but that's
So-
not going to be...
Oh, look, you've got it.
Hey,
And
look
this
at that. That's just what you made. That was the wax thing.
Let's see if we can get it. Oh yeah. Then that's what it is.
Yeah. Why don't you dip it in the water and it's just there in the barrow?
This grey surface is obviously due to oxidation, but
Yeah.
if you polish it correctly, you will find
Yeah.
the bright color of the metal.
Well, I'm pleased with that. I mean, you know, it shows that it works.
Yes.
You know, we did the wax, we made the little wax mould, the little wax model, and we put it in the clay. We baked the clay, the wax came out, we poured and placed the metal inside the mould,
Yeah.
and here we have a metal object. So it shows that the process works.
Yes. And the mix you used for your mold was very efficient.
It's almost like a little coin, isn't it? That's a success for me.
Yes.
Yes, excellent.
In the hands of experts, the lost wax process produced stunning objects made of copper and bronze. But these weren't the only wonder materials of the age.
This blue bead is made from glass, and whilst much rarer, items made from glass have been found at archaeological sites across Britain.
Glass enabled the creation of colourful, intricately designed small personal items. Items that could attest to someone's wealth or status. Archaeological scientist Chloe Duckworth is a specialist in ancient technologies, including the ancient art of glass bead making.
So you get lots of different types of beads, but people tend to, especially with beads, they tend to be drawn to things that are quite colourful or bright or shiny. It's all about that kind of aesthetic property, and often in many cultures we see that things like beads and other forms of jewellery, they have these kind of properties of warding off evil. So, for example, in the Mediterranean still you get eye beads today, and that's about warding off the evil eye. So a lot of the time that colour and that shininess of materials like amber, jet, or artificial materials like faience and glass that are made by people, it's all very much about that colour, that appearance.
I imagine that at this period of time, it's also a symbol of luxury or wealth.
Yeah, and that's the other thing, because access to exotic materials like amber or jet, obviously these things, you know, you don't just find them everywhere you go, so it can be showcasing that you've been able to afford this thing that somebody's had to trade.
Clearly, beads and similar decorative items played an important role in how individuals demonstrated their status in Bronze Age society. But to get a better understanding of how they might have been made and the skill required, Chloe and I are going to have a go at making some glass beads ourselves. First, Chloe is going to show me how to build a furnace using clay briquettes.
So here's one of our little bespoke briquettes.
Excellent.
We've got clay and then there's hay worked throughout that. And that's just going to create air channels, so when we get it heated, you know, as the outside is cooler and the inside's hotter, it won't get thermal shock. That'll help it to stop cracking.
Okay, well, you tell me where to put them.
Yeah, brilliant. So you've got a few there.
Starting with the thicker bricks as the base, each one is carefully knitted together, ensuring a seamless structure that will withstand the intense heat of the fire. With careful planning, a keyhole chamber takes shape at the back. In this instance, we've opted against using bellows. Instead, we've leveraged the natural physics of heat. As heat rises, it draws fresh air into the furnace, allowing it to intensify the fire on its own.
So what kind of archaeological evidence do we have for furnaces like this? Is there any in this period of time?
Very little. Mostly what we have to go off are the beads that were made in them.
There is evidence for glass bead making in terms of little, what we call spills or drops. So when you've got this cane of glass that you heat as you make the bead, if you drop a bit of that into the furnace, you might find that.
So most of what we know is based on looking at traditional crafts and how people do that, and also just experimental archaeology.
Right. So do we start building up now?
I think we can, yeah. I think we can start to put... And with this front part, what we want to do is just... It's going to be slightly moving in now.
Right.
Just initially, I'm just going to pop it there really crudely, and then I'm going to start to work it in. Okay. Oh, that's it. And then we really, really just get your fingers in there now, and we start to just make sure there's absolutely...
So you're pushing it into the layer below, really, aren't you?
And what I do is I do one push down diagonally, and then I kind of pull up at the opposite diagonal. And just so much of it is just doing that to make sure it all becomes one structure.
So what type of clay would you use for this? Could you use just river clay?
You could use river clay. You'd want to process it a bit. We wouldn't want stones and things in there because they're a problem when you get it up to a high temperature. And again, you'd want to mix in some kind of temper. So we've used hay, but you could use all sorts of things, sand, crushed ceramics.
Yeah.
All of these would help to make it more thermally resistant.
Each layer of clay, meticulously shaped, builds upon the last as our structure starts taking the shape of a robust furnace. A tunnel at the front allows airflow. Our structure narrows at the top, forming a peak like a volcano. Here, the intense heat needed for glass bead making will be generated, driven by the natural draw of the flames upwards. We apply the final touches with a simple plank, and the furnace is complete.
It's looking
That looks fab. Looks like a kind of a pig's head.
Yes,
I don't know if
it
it was
does,
intentional.
yeah. I mean, should we give it eyes?
You should make eyes on it.
With the furnace burning nicely, Chloe grabs a glass cane, a slender rod of molten glass, to demonstrate the process that we think our ancestors followed to produce valued items like glass beads.
So I'm going to suggest you take a white cane. They just have a slightly lower melting point. And that's it. So first of all, just flick it in a little and flick it out a bit and then back in. That's it. And just give it a little time, and then you can kind of, I'd usually start a little higher as well and then work my way down. And then you can kind of get it right into there where we've got quite the hot part of this little volcano. So I'm going to give you now a mandrel, and so it's just a long metal cane, and then the end, as you can see, has been coated with clay.
Right.
And that's to stop the bead from sticking to the metal, and you never get it off once that happens. Start wafting it at the top so that it has the chance to heat up gradually so we don't get any nasty thermal shock happening. And then what you can do, you can just keep that, now that mandrel, you can rest it into this slot here.
What, here, like that?
Yeah, so that's it. Just hold that there. You'll probably have to hold, oh yeah, that's okay. And then you want to just work on that glass. And then we're just going to let the flames really do their work on the glass. You can see the end of mine there, it's got a little bit.
Yeah, mine's got a little bit as well now.
Great. So I think probably down here is a really good spot if you keep it there. And then just literally hold it there. Okay, I can see the end of that glowing now really nicely. And then start to gently raise it up. That's looking really good. So I'd lift the mandrel and rest it on the top here, but with all the clay bit in. Now you're just going to turn that anti-clockwise. Keep the glass down. It is always such a balancing act. That's it.
Okay.
You're going to keep that glass nice and hot in there.
Right.
And then you start turning your mandrel.
Like this towards me?
Just to anti-clockwise. That's it. And then just get that slight, sorry, I'm just, I didn't mean to do that, I'm just controlling it slightly.
Do I need to have it lower than the mandrel?
So, no, it's fine, it's just because that's where the heat is.
Right.
So the heat's there. So now what I want you to do, you're going to lift that up and you're going to just touch the really clear part, the part that's really hot, to the side of the mandrel, and then wind the mandrel to the left. That's it, wind. Keep winding, and keep the mandrel a bit lower. So angle that lower so that you're working in that really hot part. That's it, keep winding. And then you're going to now pull the cane away slowly while you continue to wind. Continue to wind. Beautiful. Okay. And I'll take that from you, and now keep winding that mandrel and keep that quite low, because at the moment you've got a little bit of ribbing on it. What we're going to do is we're going to use this tool, which is a marver. So what you can do now is you can gently lift that out, keep it horizontal, and then just, again, horizontally, just run it back and forth, twirl it, that's it. You see it presses in, so you can feel that. You can feel it harden,
It's
can't you?
already getting, yeah, it already feels quite hard.
That's making it a little bit more cylindrical. You can introduce that back into the heat now if you want. So we can take this one now. I'll take that from you.
Is that done then? you
Yeah,
think?
that's beautiful. So you've got a bead. It's a
Right.
little wobbly, but
It's
I
very
think that's
cute.
nice. And then once it's had a few seconds of cooling, we're going to plonk it into this, what it's called vermiculite. It's a mineral.
Right.
It's going to insulate the glass, and it's going to cool slowly in there. So we've got a blue cane here. Well, should we take one each?
Yeah.
Yep, there you go. And then just
So
following
in and
the
out.
same rules, yeah, just do this thing where we're introducing it. So we waft it.
Watching the glass twist and turn at the end of the mandrel is mesmerising. It's fascinating to think that thousands of years ago, Bronze Age craftspeople might have harnessed this very technique, creating valued objects of both beauty and utility. From our beginnings at a Neolithic axe-making workshop in the Welsh Hills, to the furnaces here at Jarrow, we've been on a remarkable journey through time and human development. We've delved into the origins of early forges, revealing how our ancestors mastered fire to craft incredibly intricate items from metals and glass. These processes, as we've uncovered, demanded knowledge and skills that continue to test and inspire today's experimental archaeologists.
What we've seen is an ability to master crafts. Clearly, craftspeople were highly valued members of society, and their skills sought after up and down the country.
But of course, this was just the beginning. The ingenuity of skilled individuals like those working at the Great Orme 2,500 years ago would help guide us forward to even more complex times. And thanks to experimental archaeology, we can get a little closer to them.
Thanks for watching this video on the History Hit YouTube channel. You can subscribe right here to make sure you don't miss any of our great films that are coming out. Or if you are a true history fan, check out our special dedicated history channel, historyhit.tv. You're going to love it.